They handed him a letter signed by the King of England himself, a royal commission, a new warship, and the full backing of the most powerful lords in London. 2 years later, that same warship was rotting in a Madagascar harbor, and the man they had trusted with it was in irons, sailing back to stand trial for his life. This is the story of the Adventure Galley and of the captain she destroyed. Welcome to Dead Man's Shore. If you're new here, this channel is all about the real stories behind the age of piracy, the truth that gets buried under legend. My name is Jack, and today we're going back to the very end of the 17th century, to a story that raises one of the most troubling questions in maritime history. Was Captain William Kidd a pirate? Or was he a man set up to fail from the very beginning? Now, let's get one thing straight before we go any further. William Kidd was not some desperate criminal who wandered into piracy by accident. By the early 1690s, he was a respected sea captain living in New York City, a man of genuine standing. He had fought for England during the War of the Grand Alliance, captured enemy ships, and earned a solid reputation as someone who could be trusted with a serious commission. He married well. His wife Sarah was a wealthy widow, and by all accounts, Kidd was exactly the kind of man the English crown wanted running privateering operations in contested waters. So in December of 1695, when certain very powerful men came looking for someone to lead a privateering expedition into the Indian Ocean, Kidd was a logical choice. The plan was straightforward on paper. Sail to the waters around the Red Sea and the Malabar coast of India, hunt down pirates who had been attacking English and East India Company shipping, seize any French vessels along the way — France and England were at war — and split the profits with the investors. Simple enough. Except the investors were not ordinary merchants. The men who bankrolled this venture included the Earl of Orford, the Duke of Shrewsbury, the Baron of Romney, and Sir John Somers, four of the most powerful peers in England. Together, they put up roughly 4/5 of the total cost of the expedition. King William III himself signed Kidd's letter of marque, reserving 10% of any plunder for the crown. This was not a ragtag operation. This was a government-backed enterprise dressed up as private enterprise, with Kidd serving as the public face. He and his partner, Colonel Robert Livingston, helped organize the plan and seek additional funding. Kidd even sold his own ship, the Antigua, to contribute to the costs. And what they commissioned in return was remarkable. The Adventure Galley was built at Captain William Castle's shipyard at Deptford on the Thames, one of the largest private yards in England and a known supplier to the East India Company. She was a hybrid warship of a kind that had become increasingly valuable in the late 17th century. Square-rigged sails on 3 masts for open water speed, combined with 2 banks of oars along her sides that could drive her forward even when the wind had completely died. She weighed 284 tons, carried 34 guns, and required a crew of around 150 men. In a calm sea, when every other sailing vessel sat dead in the water, the Adventure Galley could row into position and dictate the terms of any encounter. She was, by the standards of 1696, among the most capable pirate-hunting ships afloat. Kidd was proud of her. He personally selected his officers, choosing men he trusted. The commission was signed, the ship was loaded, and in April of 1696, the Adventure Galley set sail down the Thames toward open water. It should have been the beginning of something extraordinary. Instead, it was the beginning of a catastrophe, and it started within hours of leaving the dock. As the Adventure Galley passed through Greenwich on the Thames, Kidd failed, whether by oversight or arrogance, no one knows for certain, to salute a Royal Navy yacht in the customary manner. The Navy fired a warning shot to demand respect. In response, Kidd's crew reportedly turned their backs to the yacht and made a rather rude gesture in its direction. The Navy captain, understandably furious, exercised his authority immediately. He pressed a substantial portion of Kidd's hand-picked crew into Royal Navy service on the spot. Just like that, before the Adventure Galley had even reached the open sea, Kidd had lost many of the experienced, loyal men he had carefully chosen. He had no legal recourse. The Navy had the power, and Kidd had made an enemy of it before his voyage even truly began. Short-handed and furious, Kidd put in at New York to recruit replacements. And here is where things began to take on a darker shape. The men available in New York's waterfront in the summer of 1696 were not the disciplined mariners Kidd had lost. Many of them were hard-bitten, desperate men, some with criminal records, some with known ties to outright piracy. Kidd had little choice. He could not sail a ship of that size with half a crew, and his investors back in London expected results. He took the men he could get, sailing again in September with a full complement, but a far more volatile one. The voyage south toward the Indian Ocean was long and punishing. The Adventure Galley called at Madeira and then at the Cape Verde Islands to take on supplies, then pushed down the long western coast of Africa. By the time she rounded the Cape of Good Hope and made landfall at Madagascar in January of 1697, the first serious problems with the ship herself were becoming impossible to ignore. The Adventure Galley was leaking. Not dramatically, not catastrophically, not yet, but enough that the crew was already spending significant time at the pumps. For a ship not yet a year out of the yard, this was alarming. Some historians believe the Deptford yard used substandard materials. Others suggest the hull had been poorly maintained. What is certain is that the ship that arrived in Madagascar was already deteriorating faster than it should have been. And the hunting had been almost completely fruitless. Kidd's commission required him to find pirates and French merchant vessels. The Indian Ocean and Red Sea waters were, in theory, full of both. But theory and reality turned out to be very different things. For month after month, the Adventure Galley found nothing worth taking legally. She prowled the gone to fever and sickness on a voyage that had not produced a single legal prize. Kidd put in at the Comoro Islands to careen the ship, a process that meant hauling her partly onto her side to scrape barnacles, weed, and rot from the hull, and to find replacements for the men he had lost. The replacements he found there were, if anything, rougher than the crew he had recruited in New York. What was happening to William Kidd in those long, losing months in the Indian Ocean was a kind of slow erosion. The man, the ship, and the mission were all coming apart at the same time. The Adventure Galley kept leaking. The men grew increasingly bitter, having signed on under the no purchase, no pay agreement, meaning they received no wages unless the voyage produced prizes. They had sailed for over a year and had nothing. And they were beginning to say so, loudly. Do you think Kidd was already in over his head at this point? Or do you think he could still have turned things around? Let me know what you think in the comments. By the autumn of 1697, the mood aboard the Adventure Galley had crossed from discontent into something closer to open hostility. The men had not been paid. Several of their crewmates were dead. The ship beneath their feet was growing weaker by the week. And their captain kept refusing to attack ships that were not legitimate prizes under the terms of his commission. From where the crew stood, Kidd was not a man of principle. He was a man who had led them into ruin. One man who embodied that resentment was William Moore, the ship's gunner. Moore was vocal about his frustrations, and on the 30th of October 1697, things came to a head. A Dutch merchant vessel appeared on the horizon. Moore urged Kidd to attack her. Kidd refused. England was not at war with the Dutch, and attacking a Dutch ship would have been straightforward piracy, possibly infuriating Dutch-born King William in the process. An argument broke out. Moore reportedly told Kidd that he had brought the whole crew to ruin. Kidd, by multiple accounts, lost his temper completely. He picked up an iron-bound bucket and struck Moore across the head with it. Moore died from his injuries the following day. Kidd would later say he had not intended to kill the man, that Moore had been stirring up mutiny and the strike was instinctive. But the law did not offer him much comfort. 17th century Admiralty law gave captains wide authority over their crews, including the use of physical force. But it drew the line at causing a man's death. What Kidd had done was, in the eyes of the court, murder. In the weeks that followed, Kidd finally abandoned any pretense of strict legality. With a disintegrating ship, a furious crew, and nothing to show for more than a year at sea, he began attacking vessels more aggressively. He took the Ruparel, a small merchant ship traveling under a French pass, which was legal under his commission. And then, in January of 1698, he found the Quito merchant. She was a substantial vessel of around 400 tons, loaded with a rich cargo: silk, muslin, sugar, saltpeter, opium, and iron. She was owned by Armenian merchants and had been hired by Indian traders with ties to the Mughal court. Her captain was an Englishman named Wright, which would become enormously significant later. But crucially, and this is the detail that sits at the heart of the entire Kidd controversy, the Quito merchant was sailing under French passes. Her masters had obtained French trading documents, almost certainly to protect themselves from French privateers. Under the explicit terms of Kidd's royal commission, any ship traveling under French passes was a legitimate target. Kidd seized her, renamed her Adventure Prize, and kept the French passes as legal documentation. Some of his own crew wanted nothing to do with it. Several men, aware of the political dangers of seizing a ship with Mughal connections, deserted at this point. They made their way back to England and told their version of events before Kidd even knew he was being talked about in London. What those men told the authorities, and what the East India Company added from its own records, was not the story of a privateer operating within his commission. It was the story of a pirate. Here is the political reality that Kidd had sailed into without fully understanding it. The Mughal Emperor Aurangzeb was already furious at English traders for the activities of pirates in the Indian Ocean. Every time an English-connected ship attacked vessels with Mughal cargo, the emperor threatened to expel the East India Company from India entirely, a commercial disaster of the first order. When news reached London that Kidd had seized the Quito merchant, with its Mughal-linked cargo and English captain, the company's reaction was immediate and brutal. They wanted Kidd declared a pirate. And they had the ear of Parliament. Within months of the seizure, Kidd's name was being read out in the House of Commons as an example of out-of-control privateering. His aristocratic backers, those four great lords who had funded the entire venture, began a very careful process of distancing themselves from the whole affair. The Earl of Orford denied he had any meaningful involvement. The others followed suit. The man they had sent to sea with a royal commission and one of the finest warships of the age was now, officially, someone they had never really known. By the time the Adventure Galley limped into the harbor at Ile Sainte-Marie, the notorious pirate haven off the northeastern coast of Madagascar, she was barely a ship anymore. Her hull was so severely rotted and waterlogged that the crew was pumping constantly just to keep her afloat. She had been at sea for nearly 2 years. She had covered tens of thousands of miles. And she had been leaking, slow but relentlessly, almost from the beginning. What happened next at St. Marie reads almost like a scene from a nightmare. Anchored in the same harbor was the Mocha frigate, commanded by Robert Culliford, a pirate who had, years earlier, actually stolen one of Kidd's ships while Kidd was ashore. Now here he was again, in Kidd's path, at the worst possible moment. Kidd ordered his men to prepare to seize Culliford's vessel. His men refused. More than that, the vast majority of them crossed over to Culliford's ship instead, taking weapons and supplies from the Adventure Galley with them as they went. When the defections were over, Kidd was left with only 13 loyal crewmen. The Adventure Galley was beyond saving. Accounts differ slightly on exactly what happened to her in those final days. Some say Kidd ordered her stripped of her iron fittings and then set ablaze. Others say she simply became so waterlogged that the skeleton crew could not keep her from sinking, and they abandoned her for the Quedagh Merchant. In all likelihood, both things happened. She was stripped, then either burned or allowed to go under. Either way, the Adventure Galley ceased to exist on those shallow shores of Madagascar, and with her went whatever remained of William Kidd's original commission. Kidd now faced a decision with no good options. He was in command of the Adventure Prize, the renamed Quedagh Merchant, with a tiny crew, in waters where he had been officially declared a pirate. He could not stay in Madagascar. He could not sail back to England directly. He made for the Caribbean first, arriving in the West Indies in April of 1699, where he discovered that the proclamation against him had been posted in every English port. He left the Quedagh Merchant at Hispaniola. She was later looted and burned by locals, bought a small sloop called the Antonio, and made his way toward New England. He was clinging to one slim hope: that his aristocratic backers would intervene, that the French passes he had kept from the Quedagh Merchant would prove his actions legal, and that the Earl of Bellamont, the English governor of New York and one of the original investors in the expedition, would use his influence to protect him. He wrote letters. He negotiated. He buried a small cache of treasure on Gardiner's Island off Long Island, apparently as a bargaining chip. He sailed to Boston, where Bellamont had assured him, through intermediaries, that he would hear him out. Instead, on the 6th of July, 1699, Bellamont had him arrested. The French passes, Kidd's primary legal defense, disappeared after his arrest and were not presented at his trial. Whether they were deliberately suppressed, misplaced, or simply overlooked in the chaos of the proceedings is a question historians still argue about today. What is clear is that without them, Kidd's claim that he had acted within his commission was effectively impossible to prove. The money set aside for his legal defense was misplaced until the very morning his trial began. He met his lawyers for the first time hours before he stood in the dock. He was tried at the Old Bailey in May of 1701, charged with the murder of William Moore and 5 counts of piracy. He was found guilty on all counts. On the 23rd of May, 1701, in the mid-afternoon at low tide, William Kidd was brought from Newgate Prison to Execution Dock at Wapping on the north bank of the Thames. The procession was led by the Admiralty Marshal carrying a silver oar, the symbol of Admiralty authority over all crimes committed at sea. Kidd had apparently been given a considerable amount of drink by someone who took pity on him, and by the time he reached the gallows, he was reportedly unsteady on his feet. He spoke to the assembled crowd from the scaffold, warning any shipmasters present to learn from what they were about to witness. Then the drop came, and the rope broke. Kidd fell into the Thames mud below the scaffold, still conscious, still alive, the noose around his neck. Some in the crowd reportedly called for his release, taking the broken rope as a divine sign. The chaplain prayed over him. Kidd was helped back to his feet and returned to the gallows. A new rope was fastened. This time, it held. His body was coated in tar to preserve it, placed inside an iron gibbet cage that had been made to fit him, and hung from a post at Tilbury Point on the lower reaches of the Thames, where every ship entering and leaving the Port of London would pass within sight of it. It remained there for several years, a deliberate statement from the Admiralty to every sailor on every vessel. This is what happens to those who cross the line. And here is where the story of the ship circles back around to where it began. In 1999 and 2000, the Discovery Channel commissioned the underwater explorer Barry Clifford to search for the wreck of the Adventure Galley in the waters off Ile Sainte-Marie. He believed he had found her, along with the remains of several other vessels from the same era. Whether the wreck is definitively the Adventure Galley or not remains a matter of ongoing debate among maritime archaeologists. The sea floor off Madagascar holds its secrets carefully. But think about what that ship's story really is, taken as a whole. The Adventure Galley was built to be the finest pirate hunter of her age. She was funded by lords, blessed by a king, and commanded by a man with a genuine record of service. She lasted less than 3 years. She never once succeeded in her stated mission. She rotted from the inside while still at sea. She was eventually stripped, burned, or abandoned in one of the most remote corners of the Indian Ocean, and the man who sailed her was hanged in front of a crowd on the banks of the Thames, his name reduced from respected privateer to byword for piracy. Was William Kidd a pirate? The honest answer, 400 years later, is that it depends entirely on which set of documents you choose to believe. The French passes, had they been presented, might well have changed the verdict. His backers, had they stood by him, might have changed the political calculus entirely. But those passes were gone, and those men had already saved themselves. Here's what I want to know from you. Do you think Kidd was genuinely guilty, or was he a man sacrificed to protect people far more powerful than himself? Leave your answer in the comments below. This is exactly the kind of debate that makes the history of piracy so endlessly fascinating, and I read every single one of your responses. Thank you for watching Dead Man's Shore. If this story got you thinking, share it with someone who loves maritime history. New episodes are on the way, and the stories only get stranger from here.